everybody, and welcome back to The Hobby Musician. Now, I am excited because today I'm going to be redesigning and rebuilding my mini pedal board. But don't worry, if you didn't get a chance to see the original video when we first put this together, I'm going to go ahead and put a link in the top corner of the screen right here, and I kind of recommend it. It's worth a watch. I take a lot of time in that video to explain specifically why I chose each and every component, as well as kind of thinking through how I envisioned everything working together. Now, you might be naturally asking yourself, if that video was so great and if there was so much thought put into this board, then why are you making a second video about redesigning it? Well, that's a great question, and I'm glad you asked. The other aspect about that first video is that I was also making this board in preparation for a whole bunch of gigs that our band had lined up, and I was trying to predict the kinds of things that I was going to need or envision what I thought I was going to use as we came into those gigs. Well, many months have come and gone since then. We played those gigs, and over time I started to learn and I started to experience some things. I learned two major lessons, and one of those things was that there was something I planned on needing that I ended up just not realistically having to use. And it comes down to this unit right here. This is my Line 6 Relay Wireless. And in that video, we talk about the fact all of our musicians, we sort of all planned on being able to have wireless rigs for our instruments so we could like roam around the stage and add some entertainment value to our shows. Well, time after time after time we would show up to these venues and we would end up having to cram all of our gear into smaller and smaller spaces. So being wireless just became something that none of us really needed. A good old-fashioned standard instrument cable hooked up from my bass into the board, that's going to give me all the space that I need. So I just don't need it. Nothing wrong with it, I just don't realistically need it. So the second lesson that I learned was there was another thing that I started to notice myself wanting to have access to a little bit more as time went on that I didn't have here. So long story short, that's why we're going to redesign and rebuild this board. So right now, I'm going to fade the video down to black to give me a chance to disassemble and tear all this apart. And when we come back, I'm going to talk us through the new design and what additions and changes I want to make to this. So hang tight, and I'll be back in just a sec. Okay, everybody, we are all set. As you can see, I'm back down to a completely bare pedal board, so we're ready to kind of go through the items that are going to go on to version 2.0. Now, before we get started, if you see anything that we're talking about and you're interested in it, please keep in mind, I'm not sponsored by any company. But if you want, I thought it might be helpful to have an organized list, so I've provided some Amazon affiliate links down below, kind of in the order that we talk about them, so it just saves you time. If you see something that you think might work for your pedal board, you can head down, click right into it, and learn more about it. All right, what are we going to start with? Well, it might come as no surprise that once again we are going to base the center point, the workhorse of this pedal board is still going to be my HX Stomp. Now, longtime viewers of the channel aren't going to be surprised by that because I'm a lifelong Helix and Line 6 user. They just make great products, and the functions that I can get out of the HX Stomp are just unmatched with any other product on the market right now. So I'm going to be primarily building up the foundations of my tone. My amps, cabs, effects, all that kind of stuff is going to come from my Stomp. Now, talking about this Stomp and all the features it has is great. The second thing that's going to stay on the board is my 2-button foot switch extender. So as you can see here, sure, the HX Stomp itself comes with 3 switches, but as we were playing those gigs, I started to realize I was very happy that I planned on extending and getting 2 more switches out of this. Now for me, I sort of gravitate towards selecting and setting these switches to always serve as a preset change, like going to the next preset up or the next preset back. For me, that works. You can feel free to set the switches to do whatever you want, but in a gig situation, it just sort of felt natural for me that I could set up a tone for maybe like the first 2 or 3 songs and be the same patch. But then we might hit like a real rocky version and I needed some grit and growl, so I'd have a new patch for that. I could just set, click next preset, and I could think about it like a list in my head, just like a list of songs that we were playing. So primarily, that's sort of what I gravitate towards using when it comes to this setup. Now, the next thing that we're going to talk about is a change, but it has to do with probably one of the most boring pedals in all of music, the tuner pedal. Now, it's true, the HX Stomp does have a built-in tuner, but one thing that I don't like is that if I choose to use it, I actually have to set some button has to control and access the tuner. So that means I'm kind of giving up one of the switches that I couldn't assign to do something else. So I like to outsource my tuning to a traditional tuner. Now, sure, this is the tuner, this is the classic tuner that's probably on 1,000 pedal boards out there, and this is the one that I used to have. But in perusing through the pedals at a shop, I stumbled across another option. And I wanted to leave it in the box in the first place. This is the Pedal Train SST space saving tuner. And one of the things that caught my eye was literally the size. This thing has to be about the smallest tuner I have ever personally seen or encountered. I wanted to leave it in the box because once you take it out of the box, this thing is tiny. Like you can see here, the tuner itself is about the size of like a tube of lipstick. Like this thing is so small. It only has space for an LED screen on the top. One section of it has a little space for the letter of the note that you're working with, and then it has just the tiniest little scale for all the reds and greens for out of tune and in tune. And all of the other functions, the input, the output, the power, all of those wires are left loose so that you can go back to a pedal board and you can tuck all of those wires underneath so that the only thing that has to show, the only thing that's visible on top of your pedal board is this little tiny readout. I thought that was so cool, so I want to give that a try on my board. Now there's a challenge with using this specific tuner. Most tuners, including the traditional ones, they are stomps. Like you step on it, and the primary reason for doing that is because when you step, typically that mutes your signal. It mutes any outgoing signal so that you can be plinking away, plink, 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 getting your strings in tune, and none of that noise goes onto your amp or goes out to the PA or on down the signal chain. That's what a normal pedal would do. In trying to save space, one of the things that there just isn't room for is the functionality to mute. So what this tuner does is it just functions as always being on. If you're feeding signal through it, it's feeding that signal on and it's just constantly checking the tune. So sure, you stop playing a song, you can play a single note at a time to check your tuning, but it isn't going to mute on its own. So there are kind of some creative ways that we can solve this. Now, in general, keep in mind, I kind of came up with 2 sort of categories of ways that you might still be able to use one of these and also kind of get that muting function. There are other types and categories of pedals that might be able to be used in conjunction with this to still get you that mute function. For example, something like a volume pedal. Now, I don't particularly use one, or I don't need one in this setup, but a lot of guitar players, a lot of instrumentalists out there use a volume pedal, and many volume pedals, for example, have a tuner output, a dedicated output that only is meant to split off a signal and send it to a tuner. Now, if it's a volume pedal, you can roll off the volume so that sort of mutes the signal from the rest of your chain, but it will still send signal to the tuner output, which you can hook this up to. So you can mute, turn off the volume, but still be able to tune. Now, a second category, a second way that we're going to that you could approach this is what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to repurpose my A/B switcher pedal. Now, if you watch the first video or if you kind of remember the way we had this set up, I had originally set this up to have two inputs where one of the inputs was going to be my wireless system and the other one I was just going to leave open for like an emergency backup line. Like I could keep a second bass on stage and I could, if something happened or I broke a string on the first bass, I could pick up the second bass and it would be hardwired in here, and either one I could just switch between whichever one it was and they all would go and send to one output. For this build, I am literally going to turn this upside down. I'm literally reversing the approach to how I use this. Like I said, I'm just going to plan on using an instrument cable. It's just going to be a cable from my bass going into the system. Well, now I could treat this like two outputs. I could switch between whichever one I want. I can wire up one output to go into the stomp and on through the rest of the pedal chain and out to the PA system, and I can wire the second one to go into my tuner. So in between songs, if I need to tune, I can switch the signal, which will cut off everything going to the stomp, send it all to the tuner. When I'm done tuning and ready to rock, I can hit it again and send it back to the other thing, which will cut it off from going to the tuner. So working in conjunction, I'm going to be able to kind of make use of this incredibly clever little tuner. Okay, well, this is now the biggest shift. What is going to take the place of my wireless system that I don't need anymore? Well, this is the thing that I started to notice I wanted as we played more songs. Our set list is a living document. We're adding songs, we're swapping out songs, we're trying new things, putting them in, taking them out. So more and more we're encountering the need to sort of cover a variety of genres and a variety of keys. Well, sometimes I was needing to use the polycapo function, the polycapo model in the HX Stomp. We might get a song, sounds great in a key, but our vocalist might need to shift it. So to make that easier, sometimes the bass lines are iconic, like they make use of open strings or relationships between fretted notes and open strings. And if you change the key and try to move it to a different place on the neck, it sort of loses something. So the polycapo model, or the effect in here, is exactly what the name implies. It's a way to capo or to change the tuning of your entire instrument. Well, that is a great effect and it makes changing keys super easy, but it is also an intensively signal processing heavy. It really makes the computer work hard, and that can put limits on what other effects I might want to dial up. So my solution to that was, I want to add the HX1 to this pedal chain. So what I'm thinking is, by outsourcing heavy effects or signal processing heavy effects to a standalone pedal like the HX1, I can free up so much more signal processing that I can get back to some of these more full patches where I have, a variety of reverbs and delays and drives all at my disposal, but the polycapo is happening over here. And certainly I can make this other things. I can go to a different patch and make this like a really drippy delay and free up space as well. But that sort of combination really became clear to me as a simple way of still keeping an incredibly compact board, but still having access to all the tones and all the features that I'm interested in. And yes, I'm brand new to the HX1, so I'm still going to have to learn how to best set this up, how to get my presets going and everything like that. But I'm really excited to use this, and I'm going to hook it up into the effects loop of the HX Stomp. So that means I can then put that block anywhere in the chain if I want something to come before or after. I can be dialing up my tones, my capos, my really heavy effects on this one and put it anywhere in the signal chain because they're working in conjunction. Now this is the second reason that I'm picking the HX1. I have always sort of been, afraid of MIDI. I've heard of it. I know that there's gear out there that's MIDI compatible. You can program a lot of things. And I've just never personally dabbled in it, and this new design is going to give me exactly that opportunity. Both the Stomp and the HX1 are MIDI enabled. I can then wire them up with a MIDI cable and start to program different features, different functions that I can do something on the Stomp, and without touching or otherwise manipulating this pedal, I can have it send commands and work in conjunction through MIDI. So I'm going to do all of that in a separate video. So if you haven't already done so, head down below here, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and sure, hit the like button, hit the bell. But more so than that, if you haven't yet checked out the brand new feature on YouTube, if you're watching this video in the first 10 days of it being posted, also consider using a hype to help promote this, so that not only can you see future videos when I get ready to do something dedicated to that, but that hype feature really helps spread the word and get videos like this out from small channels like ours. So if you'd be willing to do that, that would really help us out. All right, now to the last but certainly not least component of this pedal board. That is going to be the power. Now, I think I might be the most proud of this rather than anything on here. I can't tell you how fulfilling it is to open up a box and pull out this tiny little piece of, blue, it looks like a blue Jolly Rancher, and to realize that the power capability of the Strymon Ojai, this little power supply, can power absolutely everything on here. Each of the 5 ports puts out 500 milliamps of power, all from this one tiny little unit. Now, 500 milliamps of power is more than enough to power the 2 LED switches on my signal switcher. It's more than enough power to work the tuner. It's also exactly the right power to power an HX1. But the key here is, you may be familiar, you may be thinking to yourself, there's no way that the HX Stomp can be powered with 500 milliamps. And you're right, it can't be powered with 500 milliamps, but it can be powered under 1,000 milliamps. So the last piece of this, and I think the most ingenious, is that I'm going to be using the Voodoo Labs current doubler. Now this is, as you can see here, has the ability that I can plug in 2 power ports into the Ojai. So I can actually be feeding 500 milliamps from one and 500 milliamps from the other. Both of those get then fed into the same output. And here's the kicker. This output is even the slightly different sized output that perfectly fits the HX Stomp, and they designed it specifically. They didn't want people accidentally plugging in the wrong size. So the 2 ends going into the power supply are correct. They double the current going into the output, which I can run, and I've got a little right angle, I've got an extension cord that I can run onto this. But all of that is going to allow me to double up this and still power the entire board, including the HX Stomp, all from this one single power source. And as I said when I started talking about this, I kind of think this gets me the most excited. All of what you see here is going to be able to fit on this really compact board and give me everything that I need for the gigs that we're playing. So right now I'm going to switch over to a time lapse and get all of this put onto the board, and then we'll come back when it's done and wrap up this video. So hang tight and hope you enjoy. All right, everybody, we're done. So here it is, the brand new version 2.0 mini pedal board. Now, a couple notes as I was going, some things I didn't quite mention in the earlier part. As I was going, I certainly did make sure that I connected up the MIDI capability, so MIDI out from the Stomp to the MIDI in on the HX1. But another thing that I made sure to do, you can see that there's a whole bunch of inputs and outputs right up here. I wanted to maintain or retain the stereo functionality of all these pedals. So when I was hooking up the HX1 into the effects loop, I used a TRS, so a tip ring sleeve stereo connector on one end, and splits it to two monos on this end. So going in, I've got a stereo signal if I'm sending anything from the Stomp. And then if I'm doing any cool stereo effects with the Stomp, I wanted to send out the left and the right, which comes back to a TRS on this side. So always trying to think ahead, and I want to make sure that I retain all the capabilities of this. So the last thing to do is to fire this up and just see if that Strymon Ojai can actually power this all up. And so I'm going to reach down here, get it plugged in, and you're going to notice a couple of things when it starts booting up. Some things don't have dedicated power switches. So the HX1 right here, it's just going to come on whenever there's power. So that's why you see that coming on immediately. Same thing with my switcher pedal. It's got the LEDs so that it's ready to go. I can switch it between whatever signal's going over to the pedal, to the tuner, and same thing when it's just going into the Stomp. Now the last thing to do, the trick of all of this is my HX Stomp going to turn on? Well, you know, spoiler alert, it does turn on. So the power supply to this entire board is perfectly adequate. So if you want to try doing some of this stuff at home, don't forget, I've got direct links to all the different pieces of gear that I've got here, along with even other stuff that I use just in my normal rig. So as always, I hope you got something out of this video. I thank you so much for watching. And until next time, play on, my friends. Play on.